I can't believe that you've given us American condoms and they are such poor quality. And I was completely confused. What do you mean American condoms? And he said, working as a humanitarian aid worker was definitely among the most interesting, challenging and surreal parts of my career so far. And I've been fortunate to have worked in places such as Russia, Tajikistan, Armenia, Azerbaijan, Somalia, Georgia, Kenya, and the big one, which was Rwanda after the genocide in 1994. And while some of the work I did there was really important, and definitely we saved thousands of lives in Rwanda, for example, just after the genocide, there were also certain aspects of my life as a humanitarian aid worker which were absolutely bizarre. None more so than a project called Operation Provide Hope, which was an operation between the Department of Defense in the USA, supplying food and equipment to the people of the former Soviet Union. This was back in 1992, so in terms of context, the Soviet Union had collapsed just a few months before, and there was absolute chaos. There was real shortages of food and people were really struggling, and there was a huge project by the US Department of Defense called Operation Provide Hope, where they were having gift boxes of medical supplies and also food with the slogan on the outside, "This is a gift from the people of the United States of America to the people of Russia as a symbol of solidarity in your struggle for democracy." And the Cold War had just finished, and it was quite an interesting project because it reached quite a lot of people in 12 of the 15 republics. So it was in every single republic apart from the 3 Baltic states of Estonia, Lithuania and Latvia. And it started off with medical supplies being sent from, excess medical supplies from American military warehouses. This was just after the Gulf War, which was very, very short, and so they'd stockpiled a lot of supplies. And while the intention may have been good, and while it definitely did do some good, there were some very, very bizarre instances of fairly substandard or outdated equipment that actually managed to get to recipients, and being on the coalface was actually quite illuminating. And so in Operation Provide Hope 2, where they were sending down all this medical equipment, for example, they sent some carriages down to Tajikistan, and one of the things they got was a big wooden box with no way to open it. And everybody looked around, the doctor looked around, and it said fragile. And eventually they decided to crack it open because there was no other way of doing it. Inside was a smaller box which said fragile. And inside that was another smaller box which said fragile. And everybody was sort of laughing and saying this was an American matryoshka, as in those Russian dolls that get smaller and smaller. And finally they managed to open it, and inside they found some X-ray holders. I mean, quite bizarre. There were uniforms dated 1957. There were a lot of broken beds and so on that came down, and so really got the impression that this was just an attempt to a certain extent, of just emptying warehouses completely and getting rid of all the dross. But there were also some very, very bad misunderstandings, including a British guy who was down there in Tajikistan, and they were given all these supplies, including depilatory cream for black people. And the English guy didn't actually know what depilatory cream was, and when he gave it out, one of the recipients, a Tajik guy, was saying, "Can you explain what this is?" And he said, "Oh, it's just like shampoo." And the guy said, "Oh, fantastic, our family hasn't had a shampoo for over 6 months, we're all going to wash our hair now." So that was the kind of sort of chaos that was there on the coalface. And as I explained in the previous chapter, I was brought in initially on a milk powder distribution program, which ended up feeding some of the milk to cows. And then finally I was put in charge of Operation Provide Hope 3 in Yekaterinburg area, which is in the Ural Mountains. And it was absolute carnage. We had all this food sent out. As I explained in the last chapter, I ended up supervising the unloading of a carriage of peanut butter from the American military, unloaded by the Red Army. But it was really the chaos that ensued after that in terms of the supplies that were given. These were military supplies, like 4-kilo tins of ketchup, for example. And they went out and they were given to all these Russian pensioners especially, who were getting these supplies, and it was very, very randomly put together. And to give you an idea of the sort of chaos, for example, there was a 4-kilo tin of corn, and all it had on the outside was CORN for corn in English. Now, in Russian, the Latin C is a Cyrillic S. The O is the same. The Latin R is an inverted Ya in Russian, and the Latin N is an inverted E. So they would see that and read soyai. And so all these people were coming in complaining about this. They were getting things like brownie mix, all sorts of very strange things. And people were coming in saying to the office, saying, what the hell do we do with this? What is this? How do we prepare it? And my favourite was this very, very sweet old guy who came in. He was very, very angry. And he said, what the hell is this? I always thought that the United States of America was full of great quality. And I said, well, what's the problem? And he said, I can't believe that you've given us American condoms and they are such poor quality. And I was completely confused. What do you mean American condoms? And he said, I don't speak English, but I do read Latin. And I got this small little package and I wasn't sure what it was. And I read through, and one of the words in the ingredients I understood. And then I realised that this was actually an American condom. And I said, what was the word? And he said, the word was in Russian is prezervatil, is condom. And I saw this word, which I saw was preservatives. And so he'd gone home to his wife and said, wow, we have these American condoms, let's give this a try. And he said it was extremely disappointing and they didn't really work very well. And I was trying to figure out what the hell this was. And it turned out that it was one of those little white antiseptic wipes you get in airlines as you're flying. And he'd actually thought this was like an American condom. And that was the level of chaos and lack of understanding that was there at the coalface being there. And it got so bad that I was summoned by a regional governor to give a interview live on regional television in Russian. The first time I've ever given an interview in Russian, and that was quite an event, which we'll talk about in the next chapter. If you'd like to follow the Around the World in 80 Disasters video series, then just subscribe to the playlist on the Paul Bradbury Croatia Expert YouTube channel. Alternatively, you can buy the book, both in paperback and on Kindle, which is available on Amazon, and I'll put a link in the comments.